Hello, everyone. Thank you once again for taking time to join me for a quick 15 minutes of some leadership tips to support you to do all the things that you need to do as a leader. So, we're here for our quick check in and adding a couple of tools to your toolkit. And today's topic is on probably the most not loved aspect of leadership, and that is performance review. So we're gonna dive into that in a second. But I need to give a little note, a little word, real quick. As y'all know, most of us are living in some type of hybrid or completely working remotely kind of situation. Today, I have the pleasure of having a sidekick with me. My 3.5-year-old is home from preschool for all the reasons why kids are sent home from preschool relative to the environment we're in now with COVID. So he's fine, he's healthy, but he is home because he has to be. So if you see a little something coming out, do not be alarmed. It's just my son. He may make an appearance, but anyway, let's jump into the content. So, whether or not this is the end of your fiscal year and you're having to do your annual reviews, or you're at the midway point and so you're doing some mid-year reviews, or you're in academics where you finished the school year and so you're having to create some type of reviews for your staff, your faculty, etc. Likely you are encroaching on the time of developing some type of performance review for your team. So I thought it was an appropriate time to bring up some and offer some tips to you all on how to do that effectively and to perhaps reduce your stress on managing what typically is a very stressful time. Why is it stressful? Because no one really wants to give the feedback, particularly if it's going to be difficult feedback. And so you have a lot of anxiety about how to do that well. And there are some ways to do it well as a leader. So today we're going to offer you just a few. As always, as I'm talking, if you have questions, please drop them in the chat and I'll make sure to create space and time for you to for me to answer them. If you are listening to this via the replay, hi, you can feel free to send us an email if you have a particular question, and I'll be happy to answer it that way as well. Or you can always, in the feed on LinkedIn, add a comment and I'll answer it in the future. So always to get these questions answered, because I know this is one of those topics that people have a lot of questions and anxiety around. All right, so what I thought I would do is I would put my tips in kind of a 4 P's approach. So I'm going to give you 4 P's for an effective review conversation. And they're really simple. It's plan, predict, provide, and pause. You're welcome. But a really simple way to really have this effective conversation. So let's jump in and start with the first one. Plan. Ladies and gentlemen, performance reviews is not the thing that you just wing. It will never help you to just go from meeting to meeting and not think about it. And then the next thing on your calendar is, Jen's performance review, and you just dive in. That's not going to help you. That's not going to help Jen. It's going to make both of you crazy. And so what I always tell leaders is look on your calendar. If you see you have a review coming up, pause and plan that thing, right? Sit there and get yourself together, get all of the things you need. Some of the things that you might need is insight from other people, right? So plan in advance will allow you to reach out to colleagues, to peers, to folks that Jen works with to get some insights from that person, right? So this is definitely not one you wing. I really want to encourage you all to be very thoughtful and plan in advance all of the things that you're going to need to be thinking about and develop and pull all the components of observations, of feedback, of examples that you can in advance of that conversation. It really will make a difference if you're planning. One, it will show your level of thoughtfulness to the employee. Two, it will reduce your stress because okay, got all my ducks in a row. I've checked in with these people, and now I'm ready to have a conversation with this person. Okay, so the first P is to prepare for this doggone conversation. Do not go in here winging it. The second P is to predict. By that, I mean to predict, think about the person you're going to talk to, right? What are some of the things that you know that they need? You've been their leader for a little while. You may know that Jen is a data person. She likes facts and figures, right? So she's someone that you're going to need to perhaps provide a little bit more details around things. Whereas maybe Craig is a little more relational. He may need a little more just conversation and color around things because that's something that he's more needful for than kind of the facts and the data that Jen needed, right? So predict what they're going to be looking for and the style by which they will need to hear and really receive the feedback, right? No two people are the same. And as a leader, it is important that you start to figure out the needs of your team. If you go in doing the same thing for each person, you will likely do well with some and horribly with others. And the folks that you don't do well with, they don't receive the feedback. So then they can't make any iterations that you might have wanted because you're not serving it up in the way that they want. It's kind of like me. Every time I go somewhere to a party, whatever, they always have something chocolate. Oh, got chocolate cake, we got. I happen to be one of those rare breeds that does not like chocolate. So you bringing me chocolate, yes, most of the people at the party are happy. Me, I'm sitting here wanting something sweet. Like, well, where's my sweet? Right. And so that's the same thing when you try to do the same style of review for everyone. You're going to hit and knock it out the park with some people because they got fed and what they needed. And some people will be still sitting here saying, where's my sweet? So predict what their needs are. Okay. The third P is to provide. What I want to make sure you do, and if you watched a previous chat that I've had, these 15-minute chats, you'll know I've talked about how to give feedback. You really want to have examples, right? You don't want to live in kind of this ambiguous, high-level approach for the whole thing. You may start thematically and say, in general, I'd love to see you communicate differently. And then you're going to go a little deeper and say, here's an example. At the last meeting, ... right? So you can always start high level or thematically and give the umbrella, but then you need to be able to share your perspective using some examples. The examples can come from your experience, or if you planned and got feedback from other people, you can use some examples. I understand that when you were on that committee that, such and such chaired, one of the things that they saw consistently is this great thing you did in communicating. So I'd love to see you do that here in our department as well, right? That's a way to use examples to make things concrete for people so they can really understand what you mean by your feedback. So please, please, please have some examples in your back pocket and ready to share with individuals in any way you can. Okay. And then the fourth P is to pause. Listen, remember that you are the person who has been thinking about this. You know what you're going to say, but the other person does not. So they might be taken aback by your feedback for good or for bad, right? They might be like, oh my gosh, I'm so like overwhelmed that this person thinks so highly of me. And they might need to take that wonderful feedback in. Or it may be in reverse where they're like, I didn't like that and I don't agree. And Whichever way it is, give them a chance to take in the feedback. Told y'all. Emerson, 1 second, please. I'll be right there. I warned y'all. So give them a second to take in that feedback and just pause. They call it a pregnant pause. Let the content just like marinate with the person. Just be quiet. You don't even have to initially say, do you have any questions? You can just pause your speech. Sometimes for me, I will count in my head, like a 5-second count. And then I'll say, do you have any questions or anything you want to share? That will give them a chance to just collect themselves because that is necessary for the human mind. So the last of the 4 Ps is to pause and allow them to take in what you're saying. Okay, so that's really the 4P process for preparing for a performance review. A couple of other tips I'm just going to call out that are not a part of the Ps. This should not come as a surprise to anyone that excuse me, this should not come as a surprise to anyone that you the feedback that you're offering, right? If you are doing your regular one-on-ones, if you are someone who is giving feedback regularly, your team should not be surprised by this. In fact, they should know what's coming, right? And be prepared. And so they're just getting it like in this one moment, like this collective, like, okay, here's the review for the entire year, but they should be getting this on a regular basis from you. So it shouldn't come as a complete surprise. That's one thing. The other tip is you likely have some type of performance review process that your HR department has developed. You likely have some competencies, you likely have some other kind of rubrics that you can use. Lean on those, right? To allow the conversation to flow. You can speak to a competency that you see that someone does really well, right? You can speak to, hey, here's what I would love to see you do even more of to prepare yourself for the next level, right? So lean on the resources that you have within your organization or department in order to offer an effective performance review. So I'm going to stop talking real quick to see if you have any questions. I know I shared a lot in a short amount of time, so I just want to pause and see if you have any questions for me before I wrap our 15 minutes for today. Yep, and as you can see, you can drop your questions in the comment section, and I will be sure to answer them. I always have a few that we will pull from direct questions that we've gotten through DMs. So I do have a couple. So I'll ask one of those now, of myself now. And if you have any other questions, you can feel free to answer them. So the first one I see that we kind of pulled from the DMs was, is there a certain order you recommend giving feedback in, i.e., positive, then negative, positive first and then a negative one last, whatever. Lots of rules of thumb. I've heard people say different things. What some will say is that, there's this thing around X many positives to a negative, right? So like 3 positives to 1 negative or some type of formula like that. What I will say about it is I would definitely start with something positive. That is certain. But I'm not wholly sold on this notion of X many positives to X many negatives, because it goes back to what I said around really knowing your audience, right? Like, can you predict how, Craig will feel with so many positives if that's not their jam? If you know that there's someone who's very cynical or, just doesn't want it that way, then I wouldn't spend so much time trying to think of like what might be perceived as inauthentic feedback, right? I'd rather you stick to things that were relevant to that person's style and what they're needful for. But to answer that specific question, yes, I would say start with a positive, and then the amount of one to other, I think, is relative to the person. Let's see. Here's another question from Elise. When giving critical feedback, how do you handle the emotional reaction to the feedback? Frustration, defensiveness, etc. Oh my goodness, very, very great. A great question. So a couple of things. One, that pause will help you and them collect themselves, right? So if you respond with energy, then that is just going to escalate. So the first thing I would do is just let them share, let them let it out, right? And then I would say, particularly if voices are raised or whatever, you bring yourself really down and you calm yourself down. And you first want to acknowledge what they said, right? So I understand, Jen, that this is hard to hear and it sounds like you're frustrated. Can you share a little bit about XYZ? Why you're frustrated? Oh my God, this is the first time I'm hearing this. Okay. And then again, pause. And then you can think of a time maybe that you did bring it up, or you can give an example or whatever. But I would say in the short time I have left to share this with you, Elise, the biggest suggestion I would give is to calm yourself, create that pause, and then acknowledge the person's emotions, and then ask for anything they want to share, any questions they have. Really try to lean into what questions do you have for me about this versus the back and forth. Well, no, I said, and what questions do you have for me? How can I help you understand this and move us forward, right? You want to be in that forward movement space, not in the back and forth reactive space. So with that, it looks like I'm getting the cue to come off, and it actually is 15 minutes. So first of all, thank you all for joining, and thank you for bearing with me with all of the fun that's happening behind me. This is so not rehearsed or a drill. This is live legitimately. But thank you for that. And Elise, thank you for that great question. And for those of you that have sent questions in DMs, I appreciate that. I hope these 15 minutes were helpful, and that you got some useful tips as you go into the performance review season. But if you do have questions, comments, want to talk more, feel free to reach out to me directly. You can find me in all the ways that you can find me on LinkedIn here. Obviously, you can email me at latoya@leadbydesignlab.com. And set up some time for us to chat. We could chat for a few minutes, and I can help you through this really, really intense season. So thanks again, and have a wonderful rest of your day.